You were first a legendary video game player, in particular in EverQuest, before you ever became a legendary video game designer on World of Warcraft and on Overwatch, which I think is a wild journey to go through from gamer to designer. But first, let's go way back. When did you first fall in love with video games?
I was lucky. I was born in that golden era of coin-op. So I literally remember the first time seeing Pac-Man. I was with my uncle Ronnie, and he just kept feeding me quarters. I think he wanted to play but was too scared to. So his little nephew, he was just give him quarters to play Pac-Man. I remember being at my brother's graduation in Philadelphia. They had an asteroids machine in the lobby. That was one of the first coin-op machines I had played as well. And my brother and we would try to get the high score, and we'd finally get it, but we had to go to bed early because we were little kids. And then in the morning, somebody else had beat our high score. And then, I grew up in Southern California in the 80s. I was born in 72. So, I was a kid with that skateboard BMX culture where we'd ride 2 towns over. We knew all the pizza parlors and liquor stores and arcades, and we just lived in that coin-op phase. That was where the love started. And then you started to see things like Pong. You go over to a friend's house, they'd have Pong. And it was just mind-blowing, we're playing this thing on the TV, and it was so much fun. Atari was a big thing at that time as well. But the big one for me was actually in television because my dad was an executive recruiter, and one of his clients was Mattel. And he said, "Hey, they gave me this thing," and he would get discounts or free games. And my brothers and I just loved in television. We would just play it endlessly. And the comparison was always is this game close to what's in the arcades?
Mm-hmm.
And it was just such a golden era. And I think the big moment where it really blew open and kind of hit the next level was when the NES came out. And that, NES with Super Mario was kind of gaming at the next level at that point. And I have warm, fuzzy memories even thinking about it to this day. I remember we played Super Mario for weeks, my brothers and I. And then I had a friend come over and he showed me all the secret stuff in that I didn't know existed at the time. And it was like suddenly the world opened up more and games could be more. And then there was a big PC gaming push that hit me. My parents ran their own business. Like I said, my dad was an executive recruiter, and they bought an IBM. And this is when it was DOS before MS-DOS existed. And I was so disappointed because other kids had the Amiga or the Commodore, which, they were better for gaming than the IBM at the time. And my mom, she really encouraged my brother and I. She bought us Zork. It was just Infocom word games and where your imagination would take you. Zork holds a place in my heart I think few games will ever touch.
It's a text-based game?
Text-based game. You just type in "Go West," open mailbox, and but
Okay.
it's that power of imagination. It's why the book is always better than the movie,
Yeah, so you're starting to see these creations of worlds that you can navigate.
Yes.
You can step into this world and you can lose yourself in that world.
Yeah, you're transported. You're living there.
Was Zork popular?
Zork was insanely popular. And then there was Zork 2 and Zork 3.
The trilogy, Zork trilogy. I see it.
And it was weird in sometime in the 90s, there was this era of what they called CD-ROM games. That's how they branded them. And they made a return to Zork, but it now had graphics. And somehow that just shattered everything because the Zork you knew in your head didn't exist anymore. Yeah, Zork was fantastic. I think it might be open source now, which I think is fabulous, but I highly recommend Zork. There was also in those days on the PC that worked on our IBM was Ultima, which
Mhm.
was the Richard Garriott series. And he was Lord British. We knew him as Lord British. He put himself in the game. And you want to talk about world building. You know, there was you, Forrest, and there was all the characters. And the first Ultima I played was Ultima 2, because Ultima 1 was before my time. And that series, it was this RPG, um, group-based PC game, and the worlds were just so rich. Like, you could get on a rocket ship. You're playing in this fantasy world, fighting demons, and yet somehow you could get on a rocket ship. And then there was just all of this sort of crazy stuff that would happen in games that are based in the world. Like, there were bouncers in the towns and merchants, but if you really wanted to, you could try to rob these people or kill Lord British. You know, that was
Mhm.
something that was super hard. And when you're just a jackass kid, you spend your time endlessly trying to do these things over and over. And Ultima was really a profound kind of experience for me.
And of course, that led to Ultima Online, which is a legendary game in itself, perhaps connected to EverQuest, sort of
Yes.
starting to build these worlds that are massively multiplayer online video games. Can you take me to that journey? Like, as you start to get online MMO world, what were influential? What were fun for you?
Well, the big one for me was EverQuest. But like you mentioned, Ultima Online sort of was the predecessor, it came before EverQuest. And it was like one of those unfortunate times in my life where I was actually at grad school.
You're busy.
I was busy and I missed Ultima Online. Like, I would have had that experience. And when you hear the Ultima Online stories, they're some of the craziest, funniest. You know, I knew somebody who they learned how to poison in the game, and then they would poison apples, then leave them on the ground, and somebody else would be adventuring, and then feed the apple to their horse and kill their horse. Then they steal all their stuff. And, you know, Ultima Online was kind of, it was the earliest grief based experiment, really, like when you're treating the humans like ants in the ant farm. That was
Hmm.
kind of Ultima Online. So
Yeah.
my first, like, what defined online gaming for me was Quake and Doom and Duke Nukem. You know, it started with Doom, and they had it, you could basically LAN. You could network with your friends, or you could connect with a modem and hook up with somebody. And that was like a mind blowing, just seeing another entity in a video game and saying that that's a person on the other side of
Hmm.
that. That was magical. Like, that moment happened, and that person could be in another room or across town from you. And Quake kind of took it to the next level. Like, that's where everybody knew what they were doing. The systems were more refined, and this Quake community formed with all of these, you know, great websites, mods. The community was divided into, there were two castes of players: the uh, low ping bastards, the LPBs, and then the rest of us, you know. And I remember rolling into Quake matches, you know, on a dial up modem with a 300 ping connection. And I thought it was the greatest thing ever. Um, and just connecting with people. Like I said, the websites to this day, the only gaming website I read, I don't read any of the news sites anymore, but I read Blues News, which was someone actually teased me recently. I
Yeah.
linked them a story. I'm like, "Oh, did you hear this new thing's coming out?" And I sent the link, and they're like, "Dude, this is from Blues News. Like, what time machine did you just step out of?" And guy named Steven Heaslip. I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong. I apologize, but and it was actually through that site that I learned about EverQuest.
Mhm.
They had those programmer plan updates, the .plan files, and guys like Carmack would, they'd post about what code they were writing or how they had optimized something or just their personal life. Like, the Ferrari talk would always happen once they had achieved success. And there was an id programmer named Brian Hook, and he said, I'm leaving id to go work at Verint, which
Mhm.
became Sony Online, to work on this game called EverQuest. And I was like, how does anybody leave id, the greatest institution in all of gaming ever, to work on any other game? I'm like, this guy must be crazy, or whatever this EverQuest thing is. I need to see it. I need to know what's going on. And if he hadn't made that post, I never would have checked out EverQuest.